couple of statements. Hey, Verna, how
Hello,
you
John.
doing?
How are you?
Oh, wonderful. So I gotta set this up before you start, right? Because you have taught me, and we have talked much about how not only is it our need urgent right now, but our need has to be intentional. And I've taken those lessons to heart in trying to develop this program. And I know that grand ideas require bringing lots of people, lots of community together with a lot of hard work. And so I just wanted to say to all of the folks on tonight, how special it is to have you as our final speaker, as a native Baltimore girl, in addition to so many other things, a TED Talk superstar, an executive at Netflix, a classmate of Barack and Michelle Obama, and what's most important to me is myself and my wife's personal friend, Verna Myers. And so, Verna, thank you for joining us from your suite in LA, I suppose, and thank you for sharing your support with all of us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, John. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so honored, everybody. And I really was reflecting on this idea that the urgency of now is of now, and you know what, it always has been. It's just that somehow we have awakened to that in a way that we haven't before. Freddie Gray didn't get us there. I really am thinking about what is going to get us to understand what time this is. And yes, I am a Baltimore girl, proud, West Side, Poplar Grove. And I'm pleased to be here virtually, although I was freaking out about the tech, let's just be clear. And I'm so grateful that it worked. It is a special time for sure. And I was trying to think about how we're gonna make this special time last. Because we've had special times before, and the time that is most special to me, I was 8 years old, and that was at the assassination of MLK. And so, the fires burned in our city like it burned everywhere all over this world, and in particular in this country. And as a result, what I saw is some of the doors opened, yeah? I was one of the beneficiaries of that. All of a sudden, there were pools in our neighborhoods, and there were science programs, and I was able to take all advantage of that, including taking 3 buses across the town to Roland Park Junior High, which set me up to go to Western, which set me up to go to Barnard, which set me up to go to Harvard. And by the way, Michelle was not in my class. She's younger than I am. And Barack was at Columbia. I was at Columbia. And there are other connections as well. But
Gotcha.
Harvard, ultimately, we could say, brought me to the owner of my own business and then to VP of Inclusion for Netflix. And it's not an accident. But what pains me is that at that time, the doors opened just a little bit for just a few of us to get through. But so many people in my neighborhood never got an opportunity or a chance, and it wasn't because they weren't brilliant. It wasn't because they weren't capable. A lot of people say, well, I worked hard, my family worked hard. I'm like, hey, you want to know how many jobs my dad had? But in 1956, he was the first class of Black firefighters in Baltimore. As in, apparently, I guess Black people couldn't fight fires before that. But and I'm also sad about it because it had an impact on him and what he could bring to our family, and ultimately what this time came by, I became the beneficiary, but we do it differently this time for Baltimore, for corporate America, for the country, for the world. And so I thought about 3 things that I think make a difference. 1, inclusion. They're all I's because, I was born and raised in the Black church, and it's all about alliteration, right? It's like, can you talk about the sermon after church, right? So you gotta have words. I really thought about inclusion, intention, and impact. And a lot of people know me from the saying that I'm credited with, and in fact came up with, called, which is diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And I was reflecting on that because I was thinking, yeah, but what is to be said when forever the party has been run by the same group. In order to get us to true inclusion and to make this time different than all of the other times, is that we have to recognize and be willing to understand that the party has been shaped by racism, by white supremacy, by a false notion of meritocracy, by valuing white culture and patriarchy over all other things, including really seeing things as less about people and more about money. And you know, when you think about it, white and male is like a very powerful force and has been for a long time. And if I were to stay with that analogy, I would say one group has been selecting the music. They've been figuring out the time of the party, the place of the time, the rhythm, the access to the party, and that access has been restricted by certain gatekeepers. And so what we need to do in this time to make it different is what you are attempting to do and what ETC and Accelerate Boston is, sorry, I said Boston because I spent 36 years. Baltimore is to open the doors wide and not be satisfied with only a few people getting through. And we have to be willing to invite people from all backgrounds, especially our Black brothers and sisters that have worked so hard in this city. And we have to be willing for them to change the party. See, a lot of times people want to invite you to the party. They don't want you to change anything about it. They don't want you to go to the DJ and be like, you know what, you could play this for me, right? And so we have to be willing to allow them to lead and to change and to teach us new dances. Why? Because all the studies say that if you are going to be truly innovative, you must be diverse and there must be inclusion. That, in other words, there must be respect for the difference. There's no way to solve problems or to innovate on solutions without having inclusion and diversity. That's what all the research says, because you have to break up the group think. So inclusion is absolutely important and necessary. On the second thing is intention. And what I mean about that is that intention is the only cure in my mind for institutionalized racism and equity for all. For a long time, this country and this city, we've created systems that have advantaged the same people over and over again. And that means that what has happened is power and privilege and dominance has been cemented in the same group. That's how privilege works. In other words, people don't love it when I say it, but I get to say it now because we are awake, because George Floyd could not breathe. We are able to see what is real, which is racism is the status quo. That's how we have learned to do that. We have become comfortable with inequity and social injustice. And I've heard people say to me, you know, what is wrong with our society? What's wrong with the police department? What's wrong with our justice system? And then I heard another person say, there's nothing wrong with it. It's doing exactly what it was intended to do. It's intended to keep power and influence and dominance in the hands of the same group. And so to break through that, if you are truly trying to break through that, we can't be neutral anymore. The neutrality is the complicity. And I know that people don't love it, but what I want to tell you is we can't afford to be neutral. We can't even afford to be good people. We have to be intentional people. And to be neutral, as I said, is complicit with what already is. You know, I talk a lot about unconscious bias, but I came back to Baltimore about 7 or 8 years ago because I really wanted to give back. I wanted to see my family. I wanted to really just give back to the city in lots of ways. And it was heartbreaking. And maybe I was just way too naive to realize that in the boardrooms, in the back rooms, in the bar rooms, you name it, people are making decisions to disadvantage the same groups over and over again. And it's not unconscious. I mean, we've got data, we got plans, we've got scientists coming in, researchers coming in, telling us if you make this decision about transportation, if you build the bridge here and not here, if you add this or take this away from public schools or communities, this group is going to be negatively impacted. And John, we do it anyway. And in my mind, it would be like, okay, if we did, okay, Roland Park this time, you know, West Side this time, right? No, it's the same people getting the disadvantage. So we have to be intentional to think about who is missing. We have to be intentional about our language. We have to be intentional about whose perspectives we're soliciting. That's what you're doing. We're talking about tapping new networks. And we have to be intentional about assessing the barriers. We can't say, oh, this is a level playing field, so everybody who really wants to submit and come in can. If we aren't willing to be intentional, we won't assess the barriers, we won't try to remove them, and we will think that there's a reason why it didn't happen that wasn't about us, but it won't happen. Like, equity does not happen unless people are intentional and they are committed, and they do that over time, because that is how we break through that history of exclusion. The last piece is impacts, right? Our intentions are not even gonna be enough. It's important, it's essential, but ultimately we can only be happy if we're making a difference based on impact. We have to evaluate, in my mind, everything through the lens of impact. To make a difference, you have to capture the urgency of this time, we have to get focused on what is the impact of what we're doing, including the negative impact and on which groups. So as we make decisions, no matter how well we can rationalize why we're doing it, and you know, us humans, we can rationalize all sorts of stuff. We have people who live on the streets in next to, not like 2.5 miles for people who live in mansions. We have learned to rationalize, okay? But if we're going to make a difference, and if we're going to make use of this time, this urgent time, and make it different, we need to analyze the impact of all of our actions. And that means that sometimes the groups that have been favored, the neighborhoods, the universities, the organizations, the companies, the clubs, that have been privileged over and over again, they will need to absorb some of that impact. Share access, share goods, and not be the ones who are always benefiting. Because if we can make a decision that benefits everyone, I'm for that, I love that. But that we can create equity with making some very hard choices around, and with some limited resources. And so what I'm suggesting is that we start making choices based on helping and opening the doors to the least of us, not those who are best off, because that's how you know you're really making a difference. And that's how our city is going to grow and prosper and solve some of these seemingly intractable problems. So the urgency of the time demands this: inclusion, intention, and impact.
Man, God, thank you so much, Verna, for taking us home this way. You just gave me goosebumps.
It's real. It's real. We gotta do better.
It's real.
This time,
that's right.
We gotta do
you
better.
Gotta do better.
You know, my mom always says, my 90-year-old mom says, when you know better, you must do better. And that's the charge.
Yeah. You know, I just want to give a shout out to Dion, who is really helping to move this effort in a direction that really involves that group of people that you've been talking about. It is hard work, and she has, like Colin was saying, she has a cape on at times, because she's really pulling it together and making a real impact on our city and our program. And so, you know, it's just so nice for you to speak this to us tonight. You weren't able to look at some of the comments in the chat, but there are people quoting your words. There are people shouting out your name. I just really want to say thank you on behalf of everyone who joined in. And I wish, you know, the whole city would have joined in just to hear that part. But we will take it forward, Verna, and hopefully I'll be able to enlist your support over the months to come to help us keep
I'm
our
in
focus.
LA, but my heart's in Baltimore. Always. Always.
That's so nice. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Verna. Really, really wonderful to see you again. Thank you so much.